welcome to Thailand Beach. So today I am spending my time right next to Railay Beach, one of Thailand's most popular beaches, at its neighbor Thailand. And the interesting thing about Thailand, this is exactly where all the climbers and budget backpackers come to visit. Now this whole video is going to be all about budgeting for Thailand, a bit of Southeast Asia, and what you should know and what typical things cost in this part of the world while you're traveling. So before you start budgeting for any trip, you have to understand the currency. So the currency that they use here in Thailand is the Thai baht, which is typically traded in numbers of up to about starting at 20 to about 1,000. Now the simple conversion in Canadian dollars, which is where I'm from, the typical conversion rate for $1 Canadian is 24 baht. So I will toss up on the screen a bunch of different metrics and numbers and currencies that translate exactly to bahts. Here they are. Now it's essential that you understand your currency before you come so that you know the value of what you're getting relative to your own. Now there are 5 major categories of spending that you are typically gonna have as you travel. The first one being obviously travel expenses such as flight, different buses, trains, or whatever transportation you take to get from where you're starting to where you end. And you're gonna have these costs all the way throughout your trip, pretty much every single day to some degree. The second is accommodation. What are you spending every single night on the places that you're staying at? The third is food. So what are you paying for meals? What are you paying for snacks? The fourth is excursions. What are the fun activities that you're gonna go do? Are you gonna go kayaking today? Are you island hopping today? These should all be within your budget if you understand how to do it properly. And the fifth one, which is the hardest one to plan for, is emergency backup money. If anything goes wrong, if things start to break, if you have pieces of equipment like me, like filming gear that has to be fixed, can you afford to fix that? That should also be included in your budget, those 5 things. Now in terms of transportation costs, that does come down to a little bit of research at the beginning of your trip. So certain things are constant. The prices of taxis or Grabs, if you do not know, instead of Uber here, they use an app called Grab, which if you come to Southeast Asia, you should get. And they use cash as the transaction instead of billing your credit card. Just a piece of information. But you should do research on how much flights typically cost to leave out of your city to the city that you're trying to go to in Southeast Asia. The larger the place, the cheaper the tickets will be. For example, Bangkok flights are gonna be a lot cheaper than places like Chiang Mai here in Thailand. The larger the airport, the cheaper the flights internationally if you're coming from North America, Europe, or Australia. Try to understand within your budget how many taxis or Grabs you want to take per day, how many flights you have, and then you can build around that. The costs for flights tend to change, so updates with apps like Hopper that can send you notifications when they change are super duper important. So typical 20-minute rides in a taxi should cost between 100 to 200 baht on a Grab or a taxi, but sometimes even less if you can negotiate down with them. So the next set of costs that you have to be aware of, like I mentioned before, is accommodation. Now, the important thing about accommodation is you should have a general budget of a maximum amount of money that you would be willing to spend on your entire trip. And if you can break that up even further into the segments of food, accommodation, and transportation, that'll help you out really well. So if you understand your budget of what you want total for accommodation, then all you have to do is divide that by how many days you plan on staying, and that'll give you an average nightly rate of what you want to be paying. So for someone like me who's more on the budget end of travel, I try and spend no more than $15 Canadian a night per place if I can. Now in Southeast Asia, you've probably heard that it's extremely cheap, and it is. I can stay in bungalows, private bungalows here on Thailand Beach for the equivalent of 12. You can stay in dorms at really nice hostels that are modern, clean, and just beautiful places where you meet fantastic people for about $6 to $8 Canadian, so even less if you're trading with a stronger currency. So these are things you should be aware of. What can I get daily? And then you can map your budget out exactly to what you plan on spending. So the higher your budget, the fancier the accommodation. If you're willing to rough it out more and have a lower quality accommodation for a couple nights, or for the majority of your trip, you can probably even extend the length of your trip. So that's where costs get really interesting. You can have a 2-week luxurious trip or a 6 to 8 week cheaper budget backpacker one. It's all up to you based on what you want to pay. And the next category that we have to deal with is food. So the important things to know about food are 2 things. Again, what do you plan on spending daily per food? That's a really good place to start. What's the max in terms of your average? As well as what are your tastes? If you come to Thailand and you enjoy and you love Thai food, you will save so much money, as Thai food and Asian food here is a lot cheaper and more manageable than Western food. So you can get pizzas here, you can get pastas, you can get cheeseburgers, you can get steaks, you can get all the things you can get back home on top with really traditional, classic, great tasting Thai food. If that's something you're interested in, Thai food is typically about 2 to 3 times cheaper than Western food out here, where you could spend about 40 to 80 baht per meal on Thai food versus 100 to 250 for Western. Now, excursions is where things can get really expensive. So if you want to be island hopping every single day, if you want to be exploring different parts of the country every single day, hitting up elephants, going on jungle trekking excursions, doing any sort of thing where it's a little more adventurous, you're obviously going to have to pay extra for that service. So if you have a general excursion budget, you can divide that over the week, over the days, but the nice thing about Thailand is at least you have a lot of nice free things to do. Most beaches are free, most hikes are free. If you go into national parks, you're gonna have to pay about a 300 to 400 baht national park fee. Or if you're going island hopping, it may be cheaper to get a private boat than a group tour, where you get a private boat and 5 or 6 friends and you can all hop on that, which can be anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 baht, split between about anywhere from 4 to 8 people depending on what you decide to do. Excursions are really what can make the difference in terms of if you can afford your travels or not. And it really sucks when you have to start cutting back on the adventures that you want to go on because you simply can't afford them. So my best tip for Thailand is come here and hit up all the beaches, go on all the hikes, talk to locals and see what they love to do, because that's the easiest way to find cheap to free excursions. Boom. Now the last type of budgeting that you have to focus on, the 5th category, is emergency spending money. Now emergency spending money should be a bare minimum, no less than 25 to 33% of your entire budget. So if you're not prepared for something like this, for things to go wrong, for potential missed flights, for equipment to break, for emergency spending that you may have not been prepared for, you really have to consider having a bare minimum of a quarter to a third of your budget allocated to spending it on these things, because you never know what can happen when you're out here. I've had to spend an extra $100 on a broken drone. My mic that I'm using right now is currently laying on the ground on the top of this little platform because it broke, and it cost me about another $150 to replace it, or hopefully the super glue will work, and that's a 60 baht fix. I don't know. If I break a lens, if I break a camera, my SD card slot on my MacBook broke, and the only possible option I had was to buy an entire setup with 3 USB ports and a bunch of other fancy stuff on it as an adapter that cost me $115. You never know when things are gonna break and when things aren't gonna work, so you have to be prepared to fork up the cash to pay for these things. And you never know what they're gonna cost, because you don't expect what breaks to break, or what doesn't go as planned to not go as planned. That's just something you have to be aware of when you travel, especially for long periods of time. Things are going to happen. Things are not always going to work. Now, the last thing that I'll talk about is a little bit of how I'm actually spending my money. So in terms of travel, my flight to get round trip from Ottawa to Bangkok, I found a deal for 760 Canadian dollars. In terms of what I'm paying in accommodations daily, usually about $8 to $10 Canadian. If I want to splurge a little bit, it's 20. Sometimes I get lucky and my accommodation is free. In exchange, I do photo and video and marketing work for the resort that I'm staying at. I recently made a video about that you can watch right here. In terms of food, I try and spend no more than 100 to 150 baht per meal so that I end up being less than $15 a day. Some places you can get that really cheap. If you go to street food in Bangkok or in any of the cities here, street food is always cheaper. In terms of excursions, some of my excursions again are free. If you watch the video, you'll see why. Sometimes I have to pay over $80 for them. It really depends on what you're doing. Recently, I've been trying to avoid excursions because I am a little bit outside of my budget because I wasn't prepared for things to break. In terms of emergency money, I have not been as prepared as I would have liked. I tried to fund this entire trip within 2 months and I'm out here for 2.5. So when things start to break, I really have to depend on my skills to find jobs and work where I can exchange video photography marketing skills for a free stay, which is what I'm going to be trying for the rest of this trip because I simply do not have the option to do otherwise. So I hope this helps you with your budgeting for Thailand needs. It's a little vague, but it does give you the picture. It would be very easy to live in Thailand and to explore Thailand for under 1,000 baht a day, under 40 Canadian dollars. That is 100% doable. Where you get into trouble is when things start to break or you constantly want to go on new adventures and excursions and you're constantly piling those on top of each other. If you can leverage your skills with video marketing and social media or any other skills that you have to get free accommodation, go out and do that. You do not need a social media following. If you can leverage any sort of abilities that you have with connections back home to people that you know out here, do that. That will save you money. All in all, Thailand is entirely possible and Southeast Asia is entirely doable to travel for 2 to 3 months for under 5,000 Canadian dollars. And I encourage you, if you have larger budgets, go stay at nicer places or stay at lesser places so that you can have a longer stay. Do whatever you want, but make sure that you do come out to this part of the world because it's so beautiful. And with that, thank you. Till next time, peace.